Hello, friends, and thank you as always for visiting the Legend Sports Universe YouTube channel, Legend Sports Universe, where legends play forever. This is the Franchise Stars Football League, a preview of the official launch of the regular season. Year 1 of the FSFL kicks off tomorrow night here on the channel at 8 p.m. The Detroit Lions visit the Kansas City Chiefs. You just saw the wrap-up of the Franchise Stars Football League preseason tournament, which was done for the first 16 teams I created just as a means of drawing interest for the project, but also letting me watch games fully play out, test some things, see things that were maybe out of whack that I had to adapt, things I'm going to have to change. This has been a process that has gone on for several months. I've created 1,600 players from scratch for this project. They have been dressed in the proper gear, elbow pads, wrist pads, gloves, according to what they wore in their career, face masks as well. They have been rated in methods I'll talk about during this stream. But the real focus here is just to kind of give people an idea of what they can expect from the FSFL. The roster will be uploaded into the vault at some point next week, so be sure to click the Discord. It's here in the chat. It's also in the channel description, and so that you can know when I post the roster set so that you can access it. But for now, let's go over a few details about the FSFL. So first of all, we'll get to roster selection, which of course is the crux of the project. If you've been watching the broadcast I've done during the preseason tournament, you know all of this already. But for those who don't, the Franchise Stars Football League is based on franchises drawing from a 130-player master pool, which is sorted based on Pro Football Reference's approximate value figure, which is basically, the way I describe it to people, is their equivalent of WAR. It's not really as intricate as WAR, but it's basically just their means of providing a seasonal value to players in football history. So the players are ranked, and then it was the top 8 at quarterback, the top 10 at running back, the top 16 at wide receiver, the top 8 at tight end, and then the top 20 offensive linemen, defensive linemen, linebackers, and defensive backs, and then the top 4 kickers and punters. And that's what made that 130 master player pool. At that point, the players are run through a random generator yielding 50 players who will open with each franchise on year 1. So there is a random element to the pool. Not all of the greatest players in history are going to start in year 1 with the franchise. They ultimately all will enter the Franchise Stars Football League over time. I will create rookie draft classes each year that can be imported into the game. That's obviously how I will do it. If other people choose to download the roster set and play it in a franchise mode, you'll be able to do it that way as well. So I will create those draft classes. So everybody, for example, the championship game that you just watched for the preseason tournament, the Green Bay Packers and the San Diego Chargers. During that broadcast, I noted this selection process and noted Tobin Rote is the Chargers quarterback for Franchise Stars Football League Year 1. John Freeze was drawn as his backup. Dan Fouts is the best quarterback in Chargers history. Dan Fouts will be in the player pool. He's just not there yet. Phillip Rivers, same thing. Justin Herbert, etc. That's the way it'll work for everybody. We'll get to another example in a minute where you can take a look at the sheets. I'll get to that after I'm finished with the description here in a moment. And that is 2 quarterbacks, 4 running backs, 6 wide receivers, 3 tight ends, 8 offensive linemen, 8 defensive linemen, 8 linebackers, and 9 defensive backs, and then just 1 kicker and punter. And that makes out your roster for year 1 of the FSFL. So that's how the rosters themselves were constructed. I have flatteringly received many requests about posting this roster so that other people can use it, which I obviously will do. Sometime next week, I'll get the roster up in the vault. I may make a couple of last-minute tweaks that I've noticed in the last little bit of testing within franchise mode that I have to go through the roster outside of franchise mode to update so that that people can utilize those changes. But other than that, I will get it up in the vault next week, and I'm already prepared. You can like or dislike something that somebody uploads into the vault, and I'm prepared for a bunch of dislikes because people aren't going to see the description that tells them to come and see this video to learn about the project, and they're going to download it as a Legends, franchise, stars, greats project, whatever, and they're going to go to the 49ers and see there's no Joe Montana, and Detroit Lions and see there's no Barry Sanders. And like, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's talking about. How do you omit those guys? Because they don't really get what the project is designed to do. So I'm already preparing for a bit of that. But that is the theory and the basis for the roster selection in the Franchise Stars Football League. So here's an example. This is the Dallas Cowboys quarterback group. So you'll see this is just information copied right from Pro Football Reference, and you'll see the sorted order for the Cowboys. Their actual ranking is on the left. Staubach, Troy Aikman, Tony Romo, Danny White, Dak Prescott, Don Meredith, and then you see Eddie LeBaron slipped in there. He's kind of out of order. And then Steve Pellor is 8th. Obviously, throughout sports history, throughout football history, lots of players will show up on multiple lists, as was the case with the Franchise Stars Baseball League. Player will go to the team that he ranks the highest on their player list, on their AV list. My guess, I don't remember off the top of my head, that number 7 slot probably went to Craig Morton. And Craig Morton probably ranks higher on, he's probably with the Broncos, which is why he was deleted, and Eddie LeBaron slips into that spot. And it doesn't really matter for our purposes here whether LeBaron is listed as 7th or 8th there on the left. It's still going to be up to a random generator, not his ranking anyway. So if you go all the way over to the right, you'll see after the team spot, there is a space there, and then it says rank. And in that column where there's the space, there are a bunch of numbers ranging all the way from the 28 to the 209. It's a master number. I think I probably went to like something like 1 to 250 when I did it. So a random generator is spitted out. Random number is spit out for each player. And then next to that is the rank. The highest number is first, going all the way down to 8 there. So you'll see, if you were just doing a regular Franchise Stars project, you probably take Roger Staubach and Troy Aikman as your 2 quarterbacks for the Cowboys. Because of the random generator method of approaching this, instead, the Cowboys, they did end up with Staubach, which is obviously great for them, but their other quarterback on the roster is Steve Pellor. Obviously a huge difference if Staubach goes down and has Troy Aikman behind him as opposed to having Steve Pellor be the backup. You could have ended up with Eddie LeBaron and Steve Pellor as your 2 quarterbacks. A couple of teams got terrible draws at quarterback. I'm trying to think off the top of my head, but like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have Jameis Winston and Josh Freeman. The Redskins / Commanders ended up with Taylor Heineke and Jason Campbell as their 2 quarterbacks. So obviously the Redskins have plenty of good quarterbacks. Sonny Jurgensen, Joe Theismann. They could have gotten plenty of guys better than that. They got the bottom of the barrel at that quarterback draw. So the random draw thing kind of makes for a little bit of an interesting situation there. But that's how it is done. And again, it goes down that through every position, through every franchise, and that is how the player selection for the first year of the FSFL is completed. So up next, we'll get to how the players are rated for the FSFL project. Everything that I do in any project that I do is always based on formulas that I create. Formulas just allow for a very easy way of, if something is awry in the project, it makes it easy to fix everything. If the overall speed of players is too fast, then I can just go and adjust the formula to drop all the speeds by 5% or whatever, for an example. So that's an oversimplification, but that's the biggest reason why I use formulas, because it makes it very easy to manipulate things and keep everybody on the same playing field, as opposed to just kind of saying, oh, I feel like this guy is an 83 in my head, and then the next guy saying, I feel like this guy is an 85 or whatever. So that's the biggest reason that I use formulas for things. I won't walk through how all the specific formulas are calculated because that's just tedious. But the general approach to it is players are first evaluated relative to the era in which they played in. I am a big proponent of that. If you're going to do something like I do and you're going to take players from different eras and throw them into the same pool, in order to basically respect where a player ranks in the pantheon of greats in their sport, you have to kind of evaluate them against the pool that they played against. Games have changed. The game has evolved. The game now is a much different game than it was in the 60s and 70s. If you evaluated quarterbacks today, or you evaluated quarterbacks from the 70s in terms of something like completion percentage, on the same basis that you evaluate players today, all of those players in the 70s are going to be rated terribly because it was a high risk. They didn't, passes were designed to go way down the field. There wasn't a ton of short screens, short crossing routes, spread pro style offense like there is now. There was a lot of deep balls, which meant for more interceptions and a lower completion percentage. So if you're going to rate somebody like a Staubach or a Bradshaw, or Joe Namath or whatever, you have to evaluate them relative to the era that they were in. So that's the first way that they go through. Then players are adjusted based on how their era performance compares to the era performance of the other players who are in the pool in the league. And then after that, I'll have a core rating. I run everybody through the game. Again, 1,600 players I've created for this project. Lots of testing, lots of simming, lots of watching, and then seeing what needed to be adjusted from there. And then final adjustments are made across the board as needed to compensate for the Madden game engine. So I'll kind of walk you through just one example here just to give you an idea of what I mean when I reference this. And we'll use Frank Gore as an example. Gore, one of the running backs for the San Francisco 49ers. Frank Gore has the second most rushing yards in football history. The only one with more is Emmitt Smith. Now, Frank Gore was a very solid running back. He was incredibly consistent. He was incredibly durable. But I don't think there's anybody who thinks that Frank Gore is the second best running back in football history. So we're going to kind of go through here how we pieced Frank Gore's ratings together to give you a better idea of things. So here we look at Frank Gore's stat sheet, and what we do is we take his top 3 AV seasons, and that's what we're going to base his ratings on. So this is a little bit different than the baseball project. The baseball project, because MLB The Show has kind of a definitive potential rating you can set for a guy to kind of set his development tier, it's a little bit different. For the Franchise Stars Baseball League, a player's starting ratings are based on his full career averages, and then his potential is based on his peak 3 years. Madden's not as intricate in that as far as reaching potential. So because careers are a bit shorter in football, I decided to just base a guy at his peak and then let his development take course however it takes course. So we've got the top 3 years for Frank Gore's career here. Let's see those numbers. You see his stats on, start off on the left, attempts per game, average yards per carry, longest carry, touchdowns, fumbles, receptions per game, and then that AV figure, the approximate value I was talking about. Then you have several columns of what the league average was for all running backs who played the full schedule that season. And that kind of sets our base. So now we go down to the green line. The green line is how those relevant numbers fared relative to the league. You'll see that the average, for example, his yards per carry is 13% above league average. His longest carry is 11% above league average. His attempts per game a little bit above league average. So he's not blowing the field away there, but it certainly is still a very, very solid figure. So After that, we go down to the yellow line, and the yellow line is his figures, how that relative to league figure, what percentile that puts him in relative to all the running backs in the player pool. And that's the second part of what I was talking about before. So the green line is how he relates relative to his era, and then the yellow line is how that performance relative to his era rates compared with the other players in the pool relative to their era. And that's how we establish the tiers of the players. One of the big things that I do ratings-wise is I use a much broader scale than what Madden is normally going to use. And you kind of find, and I won't go too far off on this tangent here, but you kind of find a lot of games with Major League, Professional League licensing kind of do that. You know, you don't want to go rating a guy bottoming out. But for me, a big thing about how these games are flawed a lot of the time is that they don't differentiate between the players enough. So everybody is kind of rated too similarly. I've talked about that a lot in MLB The Show as far as defense, where everybody kind of feels the same on defense. With Madden, that's the kind of thing, particularly with like wide receivers, and even running backs to a degree, they kind of feel the same if everybody's rated an 85 plus in a given category, everybody's going to feel pretty much the same. You don't want that. You want players to feel different. That's the whole purpose of doing something like this. So after those two things are done, those two numbers, the relative to the league and the relative to the pool figures, are run through the formulas, and there you see the resulting ratings down in red. Those yellow shaded ratings are for my benefit, really, because those are the categories that carry the most weight at a given position. So for Gore, AWR is awareness, BCV is ball carrier vision, CAR is carry, which is largely tied to fumbles and stuff like that, ball protection, and then of course the speed rating. The IBK and the LBK are impact blocking and lead blocking. That's really more for fullbacks than for halfbacks. The other figures matter too, but those are the big ones. If a player rating you feel is significantly off, if you adjust those, you can get a guy. I don't get too stuck on overalls, but I do want things to fall in a certain guideline. So like I won't say a player, oh, this guy should be rated in 86. He absolutely should be rated in 86. But I'll say a player should be rated somewhere between 83 and 89. And then as long as the ratings that I spit out fall within that range, then I'll leave it. If they end up higher than that range, I'll get them cut to an 89. If they end up below that range, I'll raise them up to an 83. So again, it's kind of acknowledging that while I put a ton of work into this, and while I like to think that I'm really good at the formula development, I'm certainly by no means perfect. And there are sometimes just players who you're going to run through who the formulas underrate or overrate. So it kind of gives me a little means of a checks and balances on myself, frankly. You look over here to the right, the PB, AP1, AP2, that's the number of Pro Bowls, number of first team All-Pro appearances, and second team All-Pro appearances. And those get run through a little calculation to help me spit out a minimum and a maximum rating for a player. So you'll see Frank Gore, for example, you've got him in minimum of 82, a max of 89, and then the overall calculation ends up spitting him out as an 87. So he ended up within the acceptable range. That's where Frank Gore sits. All goes well there. But that's how the player ratings are created. I'll hop on over, show you these two portions of the sheet really quick. This is where all the data is that spreadsheet, that the rating spreadsheet pulls from. It's got all of the league data among the regulars at that position. So when you type in a player, Frank Gore, it enters 2006. Well, on that stat line, those columns that are on the right, it will pull up the league averages from this spreadsheet and plug them in there for you to compare his regular data for. The other spreadsheet that's involved in this is drawing from the high-low in the player ranges I talked about expanding the player range a bit, but I also don't want to work too far out, entirely out of the parameters that Madden uses. So, like, if Madden may have a few guys ranked down at 50 in a category, but the overwhelming majority are between 70 and 90, I won't drop the pool. I won't extend that category to go down to 25 because I think that may cause a problem. But I will use 50 since it gives it to some players. I will use that as the floor and then work within that parameter. So this chart just gives you the minimum and maximum for the given position for the different categories, and that's what that spreadsheet draws its numbers from. Up next, we're going to take a look at the schedule details for the league. You can't create a custom schedule, so the teams in year one are going to play the just completed 2023 NFL schedule, which is why the opening game is Lions at Kansas City. That's just as it was on the real docket. For each scheduled week, I'm going to stream 3 games live here on the channel. And I'm going to do that for the first 16 weeks of the 18-week season. The final 2 weeks, I will broadcast or stream in some fashion, at least. I'll probably broadcast all of them. And things will slow down a little bit, kind of like I do during the pennant chase in MLB The Show. We'll broadcast every game of those final 2 weeks that involves any team that's still in the playoff hunt. What about the games that are not streamed? Okay, so one of the things that I had to do, and I've referenced before about jumping through some Madden hoops here, and this is one of them. On the whole, the stats have looked great. I've been really, really happy with them. In the games that are played out that I've been live streaming, if you've been following along, the one stat that's been out of whack is the sacks were high. I was really hoping to be able to adjust things to get it to between like 2 and 4 sacks a team per game, which is kind of more realistic for the late 80s, early 90s era that I'm focusing on. I've been able to get the completion percentages down, which was the other one. I've been able to get that, so that's okay. But those sack totals, your high-powered defenses, the Vikings got a great defensive line draw. Alan Page and Carl Eller and John Randall and Keith Millard and Doug Martin, all guys who were 10-plus sack guys. The Vikings got all of them in their year one draw. Really, really potent defense. The Chargers, Leslie O'Neal and Fred Dean, Ernie Ladd, and Louis Kelcher, again, all 10-plus sack guys. They got them in the draw. Those teams were getting like 10 sacks, and that's too much. That kind of throws. I don't mind a little bit of deviance because again, this isn't a season replay, and you're bringing all the greats together. So there's not really hey, this is precise. It has to be this kind of number, but it does have to be in a range that I find realistic that you could see, and 10 sacks is too much. So I had to adjust ratings to account for that in the played games. In the quick simmed games, and by quick simmed I mean, for example, if you guys are following the Field of Dreams baseball project that Steve and Big Clue are running, any of the games that they don't stream, just get quick simmed in the background and they give you the score updates. Same thing with Madden. Well, if you run that through, the game engine actually does an excellent job on the whole. The penalty totals are correct, which is great because the penalties are low in played out games. And the sack totals are in line with where they should be, which is awesome. The passing totals are a bit elevated in the quick sim games, largely because the game engine is based on modern football. The default is to have it do high completion percentages and stuff like that. So you've got lots of quarterbacks, even your mid-range rated guys, completing 65 to 75% of their passes, and thus they're throwing for 4,000 yards, which kind of throws things out of whack. So what I tried to do was find a way to balance those two things and get us to a point where at the end of the year we're looking at a really realistic set of stats. It's going to alternate, other than the streamed games, which can be from either conference and whatever. The non-streamed games are going to alternate who is being quick simmed and who is being basically played out like the streamed games, even though I won't broadcast all of them. And that's going to give everybody a mix of the two game engines that by the end of the season is going to merge everything together into what I think is going to be a pretty realistic stat line at the end of the year for everybody. So it's going to go by the conference of the home team. So like in year one, the AFC, not year one, I'm sorry, week one, AFC home games that aren't the stream games are going to be quick simmed. The NFC games will be played out using the full game engine. And then week two, those two will flip, and the NFC games will be quick simmed, and the AFC home games will go and be played out. And that's going to get us to a point where at the end of the year, everybody's had a mix of the two game engines. So again, the multitudes of the stats that work correctly, awesome. They're unaffected by whichever game engine we use. But the two things that were a bit out of whack will kind of be brought back toward the middle by virtue of doing it this way. Up next, we'll talk about coaches and playbooks. Obviously, a fundamental part of football is the coaching. And I wanted to try to make sure that I really made that a part of this. Every team needs to feel different. It's not like baseball where a manager really doesn't have much to do, frankly, other than like almost kind of handle the clubhouse more than game management. A little bit of bullpen stuff here and whatnot. But I mean, the coaching is such an intricate part of football that it has to be a part of the game. So each franchise has a coach pool, much like the player pool. The coach pool is based on any coach who took that franchise to the playoffs. Again, we're working from 1960 to present. The only time that doesn't count is if a player if a coach is someone who is involved in a player pool. So somebody like Mike Ditka, for example. Ditka is in the Bears player pool. So Ditka is not an eligible coach for the Bears at this point. Now, Ditka made the Bears out of year one. So if this goes on 15, 20 seasons, as I'm hoping that it will, at some point, Ditka will retire. And after Ditka retires, then I will let him join the Bears coaching pool. The year one coaches were selected via random generator in the same means that they were selected, for the player pool. But the coach likelihood was kind of a weighted percentage figure based on their overall success. Different rounds of the playoffs got them more points, etc., and gave them a bigger chunk of the pie as far as the random generator went. Defense custom playbooks, or I should say the offensive custom playbooks, are all based on Action PC game plan data, and I'll show a shot of that in a little bit. Just to give you an idea of how I'm devising these. I won't go too much into detail about that. I'll do a deep dive on it in some video in the future. But just to give you an idea of where I'm drawing data from. And so those Action PC game plan data based playbooks will be used for all the stream games and all the fully simmed out games, even the ones that I don't stream. The quick sim games use different schemes that Madden has. I tried to pick the scheme that best fit the way that team would play, and that will impact the sim engine. A lot of teams I really had to pick a run leaning scheme to get teams to run the ball an appropriate amount of time. But I was able to kind of balance that out a bit. But for anything that is actually played out, the custom playbooks will be in effect. All teams for now are using a multi-scheme defense that is one of the playbooks that comes with Madden. And that's simply because I just didn't have time to put together all the defensive playbooks to this point. I'm still putting together some of the offensive ones and wrapping those up. And doing the defense, I haven't really honed my process for doing that yet. For the offense ones, I at least kind of have it set how I'm going to handle it. So defense will probably all use that multi-scheme defensive base for year one, and hopefully I'll have defensive playbooks set for year two. So here again, you can see the game plan data this is what Action PC gives you for any coach. So I was able to kind of compile this data for whoever the coach was, and then create game game plans based on that. So you'll see, running play for each down and each yard and distance. There's an overall run percentage you see there at the top. Formations are up at the top right there, whether they used a shotgun, above average, average, below average, etc. What kind of run, inside, outside, a draw play, what kind of screen, what kind of pass play, short, medium, or long. And I developed a chart that compiles all of that stuff. And then again, we dip into the random generator again to kind of have each team draw different plays from the different formations that fit that playbook data. And here you can see the sheet where I use to compile all that data from Action PC. Again, I'll do a deeper dive on playbooks as a separate video because it'll take a while to go through all that, and that's not really the purpose of this. I just wanted to kind of touch on how I'm going about devising the playbooks for the FSFL. So overall, what can you expect from the FSFL? For one thing, hopefully you can expect a fun quality broadcast. I try to do that on here on the channel. I try to make the broadcast as kind of realistic as possible while still being able to kind of engage with the great group that we've got in the live chats and stuff like that. And I have fun with it, and I really love doing it, but I try not to take it too seriously. So we'll have some fun and joke around a little bit at some points during the streams. But I really want it to feel like you're watching this all unfold. Again, this whole thing, everything that I do here at the Legend Sports Universe is to kind of try it. It's a good friend Beatles Eternally has given me credit for kind of trying to educate people about sports history. And while I appreciate that, it's just more kind of celebrating sports history. I'm not arrogant enough to think that I educate people on the history of these games, but I do know from seeing other, all-time projects and stuff like that just a lot of people don't go as deep as I do. And that's just a love of the sports and a love of history and bringing all of those things together here. So as far as how the league is going to play out itself, I think it's a relatively balanced league. It's got a slight lean towards offense, but we're not going to have 45 shootouts, happening all the time or anything like that. The goal is we're going for a late 80s, early 90s style here. I mentioned this earlier, completion percentages in the 50s to maybe low 60s%, not 60 to low 70s like the present. Because of the nature of the talent pool, there are a few more big plays than usual. It's not anything extreme, but you will see big plays. You'll have seen it in that championship game just now. Devontae Adams and James Lofton. These guys are all-time kind of players, blowing up for big plays. Wes Chandler, stuff like that. So you will see some big plays, but you're also going to see a lot of times plays not working and offenses getting muted. So instead of, you may see a 30-yard play instead of 3 10-yard plays, that kind of thing. Sack totals, again, as we mentioned, a little bit high, but I have been able to navigate that a bit and bring that figure down to what I think, given the player pool, is a pretty realistic level. It's still a little bit high, but it's not high to the point where I find it intrusive or offensive at this point. So we'll see some of that. You're going to see great sack guys getting their sacks. Derek Thomas and guys like that. Reggie White. They're going to pile up some decent totals. But again, in versions that I've done of this during the testing, it gets to the end of the year and nobody's rolling around with 30 sacks. I haven't seen anybody break the sack record as of yet. I think the highest I saw Howie Long one year, I think, had 21 or 20. But most of the time the leader is sitting between 15 and 20 and that kind of thing. It's going to be a competitive league. There's a few great teams. There's a few terrible teams who got really bad draws. But most of the teams are going to be solid and in the hunt deep into the season, which I think is going to make for a really fun experience that I hope will be able to keep you guys all engaged and interested in the league rolling on. Of course, I mentioned the last 2 weeks of the season will stream any game that has any playoff implications, and obviously the entire playoffs, as I do for the Franchise Stars Baseball League, will all be streamed live here on the channel as well. So with that, I'm going to wrap this up. I hope that you've enjoyed this and I gave you a little bit more info about the league and how I've gone about doing it. I'm not going to get into how I made player model, the dress the players and all that kind of stuff. I talked about that before. That's just basically every player after rating went onto Google Images, found pictures of the players, probably tried to get guys wearing the authentic, the proper gear as much as I could. Again, I didn't worry about footwear, didn't worry about sneakers and socks and stuff, but I wanted guys wearing era appropriate, the right face masks, and whether they wore elbow pads or not, or wristbands, or wrist tape, or gloves or no gloves, and long sleeves and short sleeves and all that kind of stuff. I really want to make the players look as authentic as I can. Thankfully, they have helmets on because the EA face models are absolutely atrocious. But as I've pointed out previously. But most importantly, just a huge thank you to you guys for supporting not just this project, which I know has taken a while for me to get off the ground, but everything that I've done here with the Legend Sports Universe, and I'm really hugely appreciative of the support and this and the community that's kind of been formed here. We got a great group of people, a great group of guys doing stuff on their own channels. I urge you to check out the entire group here that we've got. Beatles Eternally and Bernie Strom and Dwayne Martz and Steve Tate and I didn't want to start naming this. I know I'm going to leave people out. We got Mike Silva starting the stream. We got guys in the Discord doing their streams. Al Red Sox fan, of course, and Chris Slovic, two guys who really got me involved in doing this in the first place. So huge thanks go out to them. But just very, very appreciative of this community and really looking forward not just to this project starting, but getting back to streaming with some degree of regularity. I know this project has taken a ton of time from me, and it's dipped into not only my being able to get year 3 of the FSBL going, but my streaming as a whole. And I've missed it, and I've missed being able to engage with all of you guys in that setting as well, with the frequency that I had been able to. So I'm looking forward to getting things rolling again from the streaming and the fun part of this now that the work part of this is done. So again, thank you guys so much. Please enjoy the rest of your night. Be good to each other. Join the Discord to keep up on all the stuff with this project. I'll be posting stats and screenshots and little clips and all that kind of stuff in there. The Discord is I'll drop it into the chat here, but it's also in the main link in the description of the channel. All right, so be good to each other, guys, and we will talk soon. And be sure to tune in tomorrow, 8 p.m. here on the channel. Year 1 of the FSFL kicks off the Detroit Lions and the Kansas City Chiefs.